Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Michaela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Michaela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Now writers, today is Tuesday, and instead of jargon or writing prompt today, we are going to talk about relationships. In life we have all sorts of relationships. Daughter, son, mother, father, friend, employee, employer, boss, etc. And some relationships run smoother than others. Today we are going to talk about the 3 C's of good relationships. I know you're asking, why are we talking about relationships? But I'm sure your story is not about one person on an island. Well, it could be. In Castaway, Tom Hanks was in that movie where his plane crashed on a deserted island. But most of the stories out there most of the stories that we write will have more than one character. At least your antagonist and your protagonist, or vice versa, your protagonist and your antagonist. You at least have those two. But you probably have other characters in your stories, and thus you will have relationships in your stories. Today we will discuss the elements for a good relationship. And certainly there are elements for bad relationships. Today we will focus on 3 things. Like I said, the 3 C's. So we have communication, compromise, and commitment. Okay. Communication. Sounds easy, right? Just talk, say something, right? Well, no. Because communication is both verbal and nonverbal. You can have hidden meanings or double meanings. Moreover, healthy communication is not always about talking or projecting. Sometimes it's more about listening and acting. Add in not only what someone says, but how they say it. Did the person say it or yell it? Was the person speaking calmly or in anger? You know? My dad said there were 3 things that come out of a conversation. 1 is what the other person thinks he or she says or said. 2 is what you think you hear. And 3 is what the other person actually said. So we know we all misspeak and we all say things, and then, we all hear things differently. My father's point was about misunderstandings. He was trying to soothe things over between me and my mom, saying that maybe we had a misunderstanding. I was like, no, I heard this. Anyway, we've also on this channel talked about perspectives a few times. So you can say the same thing using the exact same words and intonation to 2 or 3 different people, and each person will hear or pick up on a different part of the message, especially if one of them thinks there is a hidden message or a double meaning, or if one of them knows an inside joke with the person speaking. Let's think about our writing, because that's what this channel is about. Our writing and our characters. How do they communicate? Superman didn't verbalize a lot of things to Lois Lane. I'm going to go fly around the planet. He didn't say too much. He just did it. But certainly there was quite a bit of conversation in Short Circuit. When she was talking to the robot was reading the encyclopedias, and he was spitting out what he read. He was speaking, all of that. So there was lots of speaking in that one. Cinderella spoke a lot with the mice, but not really with the prince. Woody in Toy Story spoke about the plans the toys had. Go invade the birthday party and watch the birthday party and see what presents they had. You know, so he was communicating. Think too about a movie or a book where a great monster comes up behind the character and the character facing the monster just freezes, and the body motions of the character that is facing the monster, you know, so the monster's behind one character but the other character's facing it, so the person knows something is back there. They have to turn and look. This happens in Willow. The character reads the facial expression and body motions of the character that is facing that monster to know to look behind himself. And, you know, then they get scared and they run over and they both start fighting the monster. That facial expression and body motion is communication. Think of Three's Company, which is a sitcom a long time ago. Most of the episodes had a miscommunication or a misunderstanding, and that made most of the comedy in that show. Think of shows or movies with soldiers. Sometimes the communication is in code. You know, red one, red one. I have no idea what that means, but you hear stuff like that. Blue one. So they speak in code or with gestures. Whatever. I don't have any clue what those gestures are. Baseball is the same way with the gestures. So they start signaling, the umpire signals to the pitcher or whatever, so they know how to throw the ball. So if you're writing a story with soldiers or including some baseball, you might want to include these signals for communication. How do your characters need to communicate with each other? I usually write a lot of dialogue, but then I narrate it out or edit the dialogue out. To me, I like the dialogue to build the characters in my mind, but if the dialogue bogs things down or doesn't move the plot forward, it has to go. It serves a purpose for me, but then it doesn't for my readers. So, in the City of the Ancients, though, the characters lived together almost 3 years before the story, and they didn't have much dialogue before the story. And we know that because we talk about the silence in the home and around. They also didn't know each other very well. Throughout the story, that changed. They got to know each other and they had more dialogue, and so the reader got to learn the history as the other characters learned the history as well. In the new story, Tahia, the main character speaks witch much better than human, so she has to translate to communicate. Anyone that knows some of or speaks another language, they know translations aren't 100%. Think of "you are welcome" in English. In Spanish, that becomes "de nada." But the literal translation is "of nothing." There are other translations from other languages like "gladly done" or "don't mention it" or "no thanks necessary." If you add this type of thing into communication, then what exactly do you mean when you say "you're welcome"? Do you mean that it was no trouble? Do you mean I shouldn't mention it? Do you mean it was gladly done? What exactly do you mean? I love languages. But let's just think of two speakers of the same language, just to cut things down and make it easier. The words someone chooses and says, along with their body language and their facial expression, will mean certain things to us. When you write a scene, I advise you to include the senses. That means what other characters see. Did your characters say whatever with a smile or frown? Did they wrinkle their forehead or push their eyebrows together? Did they roll their eyes in response to what another character said? Even if you don't have a lot of dialogue in your story, your characters, need to communicate with each other. In the end of City of the Ancients, Kirsha was able to use telepathy to communicate dangers to other ancients. So speaking isn't the only way to communicate. Double meanings can be built in the story, and this is where the literal meaning means something to characters not in the know, but other characters will know what is meant, even though it isn't said outright. Hidden meanings are similar, but hidden meanings can be a gesture as well, just kind of one little motion. Now, when you're writing your story, you can build in an inside joke, but it doesn't have to be nice. Think of Blubber by Judy Blume. The girls made fun of the girl that was overweight, and she knew they were laughing at her, even though they said blubber instead of fat. So I haven't read that book in a couple of decades, but that is what I remember of it. I remember in Little House on the Prairie where Laura got Nellie to volunteer to wear a mermaid tail, but that also put Nellie for volunteering to be in the dunking booth. This was an inside joke, and Nellie didn't figure things out until they uncovered the booth. At least that is what I remember from watching the TV series a couple of decades ago. I guess I need to use more recent examples so I don't show my age so much, because using such older examples communicates a hidden meaning of my age, although that was not my purpose. LOL, laugh out loud. You know, oh, she must be quite old. Old is not an age to me. Anyway, the next term is compromise. This means finding a common ground where people feel heard and understood. Of course, this ties in with listening. If one person doesn't listen to the other, then he or she will never hear or understand the other. I feel this can go into planning a battle or operation or some task in your story as well. You let different characters give opinions about different aspects of a coming battle or a coming operation or whatever's coming next in your story. Different characters will have different specialties, unless of course your main character knows everything and has all the skills necessary. But usually the main character needs some type of help and needs to learn. When your characters are planning things, they could take part of different plans for compromise. In Miacha has taken soldiers for herself from the allied kingdoms, but she hasn't actually chosen from one kingdom. But this kingdom doesn't have a lot of soldiers. So Miacha asks King Curse what she should do, because she doesn't want the kingdom to feel like it is less, or less part, especially when they had contributed to the battle and stuff like that. So King Curse suggests to her to get soldiers from the young boys. That way she is still getting soldiers. Miacha likes this idea, and this was a type of compromise, but it was a compromise within Miacha herself. And she wanted the soldiers, but then she didn't want to take from the one kingdom. So she compromised within herself. Compromise is important, because otherwise you have bullies who always get their ways. Ideal compromises will, to a degree, satisfy all. But in a story you write, maybe your characters can't find a middle ground or a common ground. Then does the antagonist get ahead or win? Friction among your good guys can cause conflict and might be something to add to a plot. But then once the antagonist strikes, the protagonist can come together like never before. Because in life we don't always get along, even when we are on the same side. The last term is commitment. This usually means putting each other and the relationship first. Commitments need a lot of giving and sacrifice that brings joy and fulfillment to each other's lives. When each party knows, or every party knows, the commitment of the others, and then it's easier to build up the trust. Without that commitment, then you could have betrayal, especially if the antagonist tests that commitment. In The Lord of the Rings, the original group makes a commitment to help Frodo bring the ring to the mountain to melt it. But the evil power of the ring tests Boromir's commitment. In Stargate, the Goa'uld system lords test Teal'c's commitment to the humans very often, very many episodes. And he is quite tested. Some gruesome stuff there. In Star Wars, there is a scene where Darth Vader tests Luke Skywalker's commitment to the Rebel Alliance. I think he reveals that he's the father, whatever. And in the film, though, they show this test by having half of Luke's face in shadow and half in light. That's very good in film, to use those kinds of techniques. When we write, we will have to describe things without being able to show such pictures. Now, there are whole books and whole courses on just the term communication and how to communicate effectively, efficiently, like asking someone to repeat what you just said. But you can easily narrate this. John repeated Sally's words exactly. Or John seemed to have things all mixed up, so Sally had to repeat what she said. Instead of actually having the dialogue, you could do those kinds of things. You get the idea. And while communication courses are more about your relationships in life, the contents of such courses help us write our stories. Perhaps the character doesn't repeat what he or she thinks and then carries out the instruction incorrectly. This can make for some comic relief. If you've ever read Amelia Bedelia, you'll understand communication on a whole other level. Amelia Bedelia is a maid. And the first day, the people who hire her let her in, hand her a list of things they want done, and then they go wherever. Amelia Bedelia reads, "Dust the furniture." She thinks this is silly because in her house they always undust the furniture. But she finds some expensive, nice-smelling powder and dusts the furniture by sprinkling powder on the furniture. This character interprets the whole list in this manner. So if you think you know how to communicate, you might read this cute little story and see how different people can interpret normal words. So when your characters are communicating in your story, you will have to decide how much understanding the other characters have. You will have to decide on if they need to compromise with each other, or they compromise their soul, their position, their plans, etc., which is a different meaning. Second meaning is closer to endangering or to damaging than it is to finding a middle ground or common ground. And you will have to decide your character's commitment. In plot 2, I asked a question on whether or not any would stay true to their side. And I named 3 sides. I had the protagonist, the antagonist, and the common or normal people. Maybe you decide that the common or normal people make a commitment to not say anything to either group about the other group. Just, play Switzerland, neutral. I know nothing. So they can make that kind of commitment not to say anything. And that can be hard if you've got martial law going on like I have. the communication and commitment and these things are compromise. These things are about your character's interaction with each other and how they interpret that interaction. The words said might be, I haven't any, while the words heard might be, I have many. Well, what did your character hear? In rapid speech, sometimes we throw away the little words, or we merge them, and those words can change the meaning of a sentence or a statement. So in that sentence, those two sentences, any and many, kind of rhyme. So it would be easy to not hear the "nt." I haven't any. I haven't any. I have many. So it would be very easy to swap those sentences. So in writing, we can use miscommunication and have those words. Those can change the meaning of a sentence or a statement when we have that miscommunication or misunderstanding for comedy, or to bring about turmoil or mishaps. Communication is important in relationships. So have fun playing with your character's communication while writing. Don't forget body language. You know, you're supposed to describe everything. Well, not every blade of grass, but you need to give a full picture of what's going on. And that body language is super, super important. Don't forget telepathy, if you use that. In operatives, Allison runs her thumb under the shoulder strap of her dress to communicate to Laura a code for a locked door. The gesture was communication, for sure. And Laura was able to figure out the code from the gesture. The rest of the team doesn't notice the gesture. So Laura's reputation of being a hacker really leaps up in their minds. So when you are writing scenes, you have a lot of latitude on how you want things communicated. A character could magically write things which can only be read by certain people or a certain person or with certain spells. This is your fun. This is what you get to decide. Pay attention to your conversations in your life. And see is paying attention. Does that person understand? If you ask them to repeat what you said, could they? Now, someone who doesn't seem to be paying attention might have a deeper understanding, but you think they don't know at all because they were drawing or writing or looking away. When you just observe things in real life like this, then it'll be easier to incorporate them into your writing. Leave a comment below on if you have ever had a misunderstanding with somebody. And if you're brave enough, tell us if you worked it out or not. Join me Friday for Chapter 3 of Tahia, Martial Law. Join me Tuesday for more writing jargon or another prompt, a writing prompt, or more about relationships between people, because I think that helps our writing when we know how people react and interact with each other. Then it helps us to develop those characters, or to know how they're going to respond to certain things and how they're going to interact with each other. So I think that is an important part of writing. If you don't know how people work together, you know, if you've never played a conversation in your head and thought of what somebody else might say, it's going to be really hard for you to be writing. But if you've played those conversations in your head, and maybe you thought John would say X, maybe he'll say Y, but you were close, or maybe it was a combination of that when John actually said something, then you can write. And I think these things will help us to be more aware of the different elements of the relationships, so that we can make our stories seem real. In between days, visit my website, www.bymichaela.com, or just buymichaela.com. My team made it to where you don't need the www. You can visit my website and read some character bios. Today I talked about Cursed, whose full name is King Valen Cursed, and he is in my Miacha series. His bio will be listed alphabetically as Cursed, without the title or the first name. If you hit like and subscribe and the bell notification, then we will continue to write together. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share this with them. This is Michaela with Write with Michaela. Bye for now.